Florida went about how I expected it to go. I kind of expected Utah to handle this game early, and I expected that defense to be swarming. Now, what they did is pretty impressive, and we'll talk about that more in detail. But this is a Utah team that, even without Cam Rising, stepped up to the occasion. And we'll talk about the quarterbacks in a little bit as well. But this is a team that's going to be really fun to watch. This defense is going to be really fun to watch as well. And when you look at what did we learn from Utah and Florida, I think the first thing of note has to be Florida's mental mistakes. That's pretty much where the game ended for them. The mental mistakes early, the penalties that they took, and it just the mental mistakes, the inability to focus and realize the importance of the little things hurt Florida the most in this game. And Utah is the team that you simply cannot afford to do that. This is a defense in Utah's that will not let you make a ton of mistakes without punishing you. They are a team that will take things away from you. And Utah essentially took away Florida's running game. And that's what forced Florida to throw so much. Florida only had 13 yards rushing as a team. And even if you take away Graham Mertz's sack yards, it's still a small number. Utah is very good at stopping the run. They did not allow Florida to do hardly anything. And that's really where those two things, the combination of mental mistakes and Florida's inability to run the football, is really where they lost the game. So that's definitely something that they can work on. And the offensive line is really where that stems from. The penalties and the inability to move the ball down the field was a big thing for this offensive line. And I honestly, the offensive line could be a solid group. It's just we have to see it first. Now, the one thing I will say for Florida is their young players got some good experience. If you look at Eugene Wilson and Caleb Douglas specifically, those two, I think, have a bright future with Florida. The question is, how much time is Billy Napier going to get? Because we talk about him, you've heard his name kind of on the hot seat. And while I do think there is some validity to that, I also think that you need to give him time to get his roster how he wants it. You need to give him time to, I guess, recruit the level of player that you want to get better. And the young guys will get them there. But if he doesn't get enough time to do that, we're not going to see these guys reach their potential. So I think he needs to be given extra time because Florida has some nice pieces to work with. The roster just isn't what they want. And I think even on defense, too, this is a group that was big, but didn't really look that fast. I think that they were struggling to keep up with Utah at times. And that's, again, something where the roster just has to be overhauled into what Billy Napier wants. For Utah, they had their own adversity to deal with. Losing Cam Rising, or in terms of not being able to play, was a concern. I think a lot of people were worried about what did that mean for this offense. But when you look at what Bryson Barnes and Nate Johnson did, they took care of business. Was it the best game? No, absolutely not. It was not the best game by a quarterback that we'll ever see, or either quarterback. But 210 total yards and 2 total touchdowns. I think the best thing that they did was that first play you throw a absolute bomb to Money Parks. And that's really where it all took off for Utah. That's really what started the momentum. You put Florida on the ropes and you let your defense do what it does best. And they did exactly that. This is a team that will not give up a lot of points. This is a team that will not give up a lot of yards. And even when Florida was moving the ball through the air, there still wasn't a ton of movement. There wasn't a ton that this Florida offense could do. Now, there were times where guys like Ricky Pearsall made some really good plays. Caleb Douglas had a nasty touchdown. That was really fun to watch, and it speaks to his potential and his bright future. Ricky Pearsall will be one of the best wide receivers in college football. His stats just might not indicate that with how much this team might struggle. And maybe when I watched the first half, I was ready to just end the Graham Mertz experience. And obviously, I'm not in charge of that decision, but he got a little bit better as the second half went on, and it's obviously week one, but I still think that there's got to be a better option than Graham Mertz. And if you're not able to get Ricky Pearsall and some of these talented players, ball more, then I think you're in for a long season. So that's really where it starts. And, Mertz threw for 333 yards, his first 300-yard game of his career, but it's pretty much out of necessity. It wasn't because he was dicing up this Utah defense. It wasn't because he was just thrashing this secondary. It's because they were behind and needed to move the ball quickly, and running the ball obviously wasn't happening. On the flip side, Bryson Barnes was the main feature of the Utah offense. Had a couple nice plays, had that obviously that big play to start the game, and 70 yards would do that. But then the rest of the game, he only had 89 yards passing. He had a nice run too, but I think that Utah obviously didn't trust him to do a lot of things that Cam Rising would have done. So it'll be nice to have Cam Rising back in this offense. Still, an impressive win for Utah. I think that they are in great hands with Kyle Whittingham. Doesn't matter who the quarterback is, and obviously it's week one. Now they'll have to figure out this Barnes Johnson situation. Will they have a two quarterback system, or are they going to lean with one? Barnes was obviously the better passer tonight. Johnson is the more athletic, the better runner, but I don't know if you can, how long you can do that. And that's what makes Cam Rising so good, is that he does a little bit of everything. He can throw the ball, he can run the ball. And obviously you want him to be back to 100%. But if you can win a game like Florida, then maybe you have time to kind of let things sit and kind of move on. But I think that this is a Utah team that is going to be tough. Once again, they are the defending back-to-back defending Pac-12 champions. So that's something to a note. That is something to keep an eye on. And this Utah team appears to be in good hands. And Florida is going to go back to the drawing board and figure out what's going to work going forward and what do they need to change for next week.